It was supposed to be the kind of neighborhood where you could exhale. After 14 years in the Navy SEALs, half of them spent in the desert under blazing suns, surrounded by gunfire, betrayal, and adrenaline-laced silence, I thought I'd seen the worst the world had to offer. But nothing prepared me for a quiet street wrapped in pastel paint and smiles with knives hidden behind them. Rachel and I bought the house a month before Hannah was born. She wanted someplace safe. I wanted someplace invisible. We picked a quiet cul-de-sac outside San Diego. Gates, trimmed lawns, HOA regulations, and more flags than neighbors. It was supposed to be ordinary, predictable, peaceful. For the first 3 days it was. We unpacked slowly. I fixed what needed fixing, replaced all the locks, secured every entry point. I added motion sensor cameras and reinforced the sliding doors. Not out of paranoia, out of habit. The things I'd seen, the things I'd done, they didn't just vanish because I signed a mortgage. Rachel knew that. She never asked me to be anything other than what I was, a protector. A husband. A man trying his damnedest to shed the ghost of combat. She'd just given birth to Hannah a week before we moved in. Our daughter, perfect and fragile, still blinking at the world with the innocent confusion of a soul newly arrived. Rachel was still healing from an emergency C-section. Sleep was elusive. Every noise made her flinch. I told her we'd build a new life here. One without fear. Then Karen arrived, and fear in a different costume took root in our lives. She didn't knock. She didn't wave. She just appeared. Like mold. I was unloading the last box marked "Fragile, Baby," crouched beside the tailgate of the truck when I heard footsteps. They weren't rushed or apologetic. They were precise. Entitled. I turned and saw her standing at the edge of our driveway like she owned the entire block. She had a clipboard tucked beneath one elbow and a thin-lipped frown that looked like it had been surgically installed. Her sunglasses reflected my face like twin mirrors, and I instinctively straightened. "New residents?" she asked flatly. I nodded. "Jack. My wife Rachel's inside. Just had our first baby. I'm Karen Nettle, HOA president. I like to personally greet new members, make sure expectations are clear." Her tone was sterile, clinical, like she was reading from a manual. I offered a handshake, but she ignored it. "This neighborhood operates on a strict code of conduct," she continued. "Curb appeal is paramount. Noise levels after 7 p.m. are monitored. And all new families are required to attend the HOA welcome brunch. Your wife was noticeably absent. She just gave birth 7 days ago." Karen's eyebrows lifted half a centimeter. "Which is why integration is especially important. We believe that isolation breeds instability, especially in new mothers. And your wife seems delicate." I clenched my jaw. "She's doing fine." Karen nodded once. "We'll see." She turned and walked off without another word, her heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome of menace. I stood there stunned. Not because of what she said, but because of the way she said it. Like Rachel was a ticking time bomb. Like Hannah belonged to the community more than to us. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe this was just typical suburban politics. Nosy neighbors. Overzealous HOA heads. Maybe it would pass. It didn't. Karen became a fixture. Every morning she'd walk her dog, a Pomeranian named Colonel, past our house 3 times, each loop slower than the last. She never waved. She just watched. When Rachel and I installed blackout curtains in Hannah's room, a note appeared in our mailbox. "Please consider the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Dark drapes suggest instability." A second notice followed when our garbage bin remained out for longer than 25 minutes after pickup. And a third when Rachel, in a moment of rare calm, walked Hannah outside in a baby wrap instead of a stroller. "She said we were smothering her," Rachel whispered, voice trembling as she closed the door behind her. "She actually said we were going to damage her lungs." The next day, a box of pamphlets appeared on our porch, "Proper Parenting Techniques for First-Time Mothers." No note. No sender. But I knew who it was from. I began documenting everything. Photos. Videos. Times and dates. Karen was waging a quiet war. Not with bombs or bullets, but with shame, control, and manufactured concern. I'd faced insurgents who operated with more honor. One night, around 2 a.m., Rachel burst into tears while trying to feed Hannah. "I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm not enough," she whispered. Like, maybe she's right. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. I pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "She's trying to make you feel that way. That's how she controls people." "But why?" she asked, clutching Hannah tighter. "Why us?" I didn't have an answer. Yet. 2 mornings later it escalated. I was in the backyard assembling the new baby swing. Something simple, something normal, when I heard it. Hannah crying. Loud. From the front porch. I dropped the wrench and sprinted. And what I saw nearly made me black out. Karen. Standing on our front porch. Holding my daughter. My infant daughter. My front door was wide open. Rachel was frozen at the threshold in a robe, eyes wide with horror, one hand still clutching the baby bottle. My brain flipped into combat mode. In 4 strides I was there. I yanked Hannah from Karen's arms before she could blink. She stumbled back, losing her balance, nearly toppling into the rose bushes. "You need to get off my property," I growled, stepping between her and my family. Karen straightened her blazer, trying to compose herself. I knocked. No one answered. The baby was crying. It was an emergency. "So you entered our home and took our child?" She didn't blink. Under HOA bylaws section 4.8, in matters of immediate concern for a minor's welfare, intervention is authorized. I blinked, disbelieving. There's no such law. I have it documented. Rachel was sobbing now. Shaking. Barely able to stand. She was nursing, "You psychopath." I shouted. She was feet away. Karen smirked. Actually smirked. If she can't hear her baby cry, perhaps she's not well enough to be a mother. That was when I stepped forward, closer than anyone but my wife ever gets. My voice dropped an octave. "I've buried men in the desert for less." Karen's eyes twitched. "I've snapped zip ties off kidnapped children. I've hauled bleeding teammates across enemy lines. I've dismantled trafficking rings with my bare hands. And you think you're going to touch my child and walk away like nothing happened?" For a moment her mask cracked. Just for a heartbeat. Then it returned. "I'll be contacting Child Protective Services," she said coldly. "Let the state decide." She turned and walked away, slow and deliberate. That night, Rachel and I sat in the dark with Hannah between us. Neither of us spoke. We just stared at the baby monitor as if waiting for something else to happen. "She's not done," I finally said. Rachel looked up. Her eyes were red. "She's obsessed." And she was right. The next morning we found a CPS flyer taped to our door. A pink envelope inside our mailbox contained community complaints. Rachel's face was pale, her hands trembling. "She's trying to take her," she whispered. "I won't let her." I meant it. The old instincts came roaring back. I mapped out Karen's house, watched her movements, tracked when she left and who visited. I memorized plate numbers, logged suspicious patterns. I even used satellite overlays to understand her backyard. I wasn't planning violence. I was preparing for truth. Because I knew something was wrong, deeper than just neighborhood politics. This woman didn't want to correct us. She didn't want control over our landscaping or our garbage bin. She wanted Hannah. And I needed to know why before it was too late. When people think of war, they imagine sand and smoke and the sound of rifles. But some wars are quieter, slower. Fought with paper, with bureaucracy, with whispers behind closed doors. Karen didn't kick down our door with soldiers or scream threats from the sidewalk. She used something worse, the system. It began the morning after she threatened to call Child Protective Services. We woke up to an envelope taped to our front door, not delivered by mail but placed with eerie precision at eye level. Inside was a formal letter with the HOA's letterhead, claiming a community concern had been raised about the well-being of an infant in the Barnes residence. My last name. Our home. Our daughter. There were no names on the complaint. Just citations. Misuse of HOA guidelines. Excessive noise. Signs of postpartum instability in the mother. Unconfirmed allegations of improper formula storage. The final sentence made my blood run cold. As a precaution, a formal welfare check has been requested. Rachel read it in silence, then crumpled to the kitchen floor. "I can't do this," she said, rocking Hannah in her arms. "I can't fight her. She'll twist everything. I already feel like I'm failing." "You're not," I said, kneeling beside her. "You're the best mother I've ever seen." She tried to believe me. But Karen had planted a seed. And I knew enough about psychological warfare to recognize the tactic. Destabilize the target. Make them doubt themselves. Then move in and claim power. So I prepared. I printed every email Karen had sent. Every letter. I saved our security cam footage of her walking past at all hours, of her stepping onto our porch, of her taking Hannah. I spoke to neighbors discreetly, the ones Karen hadn't alienated yet. A few offered sympathy but most were hesitant. "Afraid. She's connected," one woman whispered, eyes darting toward Karen's house. "You fight her, she'll destroy you." I wasn't afraid of destruction. I'd walked through worse. What I feared was what it would do to Rachel, and what it would mean for Hannah. The welfare check came 2 days later. A uniformed officer and a young CPS worker showed up at our door just after lunch. Hannah was asleep. Rachel was mid-panic attack. I met them at the door and asked if they had a warrant. They said no, just a formal request to inspect the home and check on the child. I knew the game. If we refused, they'd file suspicion. If we complied, we'd be under scrutiny. So I made a choice. I let them in. I stood tall and spoke calm. I showed them the nursery, clean, organized, full of toys and sunlight. I showed them the kitchen, formula stored properly, sterilized bottles, doctor's notes taped to the fridge. I handed them Rachel's postnatal paperwork and pediatric reports. Everything checked out. But the CPS woman, Emily, looked uncomfortable. She kept glancing at her clipboard. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, we received multiple reports. Not just from the HOA. Anonymous calls. Describing your wife as neglectful, unstable, and, she trailed off. Rachel was standing in the doorway, ghost white. Emily looked at her. "You're clearly not what those reports described. So what happens now?" Rachel whispered. "I closed the case," Emily said. But, your file remains flagged for 6 months. Any future reports, no matter how small, will trigger an automatic visit." Karen had set the trap. And now we were walking through a minefield. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. Neither did I. Every light stayed on. Every lock double-checked. Hannah slept in our bed. Our once peaceful home now felt like enemy territory. But Karen wasn't done. The next HOA meeting was mandatory. A printed summons appeared in our mailbox. Attendance required. Topic: Unresolved complaints and community safety. I showed up alone. It was held at the clubhouse, a renovated community center with fake plants and folding chairs. Around 20 neighbors sat in a circle, all facing a podium where Karen stood like a smug dictator in pearls. I took a seat near the back. I didn't need to speak. Not yet. I needed to listen. Karen began with a speech about standards and protecting the innocent. She never said our names. She didn't have to. Everyone knew who she met. She played recordings. Someone had recorded Hannah crying through our nursery window. She read emails, cherry-picked comments Rachel had posted in a private mother's forum. She even shared concerned reports from anonymous sources about Rachel's emotional outbursts and frequent sobbing. They were all taken out of context, twisted. But I stayed silent. Until the final moment, when Karen proposed a vote to censure us. Officially label our household a problematic residence. Which would give the HOA legal grounds to intervene in matters of property access, inspections and behavior. I stood. The room turned. "My name is Jack Barnes," I said. "I served this country for 14 years as a Navy SEAL. I have 3 bronze stars, a Purple Heart, and a top-secret clearance that let me see things none of you would ever want to imagine." Karen's smile tightened. "I've spent years protecting families, other people's children, only to come home and find my own under attack by a woman who uses rules like weapons and whispers like bullets." A few people nodded. I stepped closer to the front. "My wife is not unstable. She's recovering. From surgery. From trauma. From childbirth. And instead of supporting her, you've let this woman harass her. Scare her. Degrade her. Murmurs. She came into our home. Uninvited. And took our infant daughter off our porch. That's not community concern. That's trespassing. That's abduction." Karen snapped. "That's a lie." I turned toward her. "We have it on camera." Silence. "I have a lawyer on retainer. I have every letter you've sent, every fabricated HOA citation, every fake complaint. You've weaponized your title, and you've endangered my family." People were visibly shaken now. A few stood. One woman walked out. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm done playing defense. This is your last warning. You come near my wife or my daughter again, I will treat it as a threat. And I'm very good at neutralizing threats." The room went quiet. I left before anyone could respond. Rachel was waiting for me in the car, her hand shaking in mine. "What happened?" I didn't look away from the road as we pulled out. I think I broke the illusion. But illusions are persistent things. The next week, Karen doubled down. Flyers appeared on light poles with Rachel's face, photoshopped to look distressed beneath the words, "Unstable mother? You decide." We filed a police report. The officer looked sympathetic, but said it fell into a gray area since there was no direct threat. I started seeing unfamiliar cars parked near our house. The same silver Toyota circled the block every night at 9 p.m. Rachel stopped leaving the house. She stopped talking. She started crying again. And I realized something chilling. Karen didn't want to win. She wanted to break us. So I went deeper. I ran a background check. And what I found changed everything. Karen Nettle wasn't just an HOA president. She was a failed foster applicant. Twice rejected, once for questionable emotional stability, and once for invasive and controlling behavior. She had applied to adopt a child 3 years ago, and been denied. Her obsession wasn't random. She wanted a baby. She wanted our baby. And she was using the system to take her. I brought the documents to Rachel. Her hands trembled as she read them. She wants to replace the child she couldn't get, she whispered. She sees me as the obstacle. She sees us as the obstacle. It all made sense now, the obsession with proper parenting, the constant monitoring, the way she described Hannah as if she belonged to the neighborhood, not to us. We weren't just targets. We were threats to her fantasy. So I prepared for the endgame. Karen had started a war she didn't understand, not with a tired mother or a soft-spoken neighbor, but with a trained soldier who had spent years dismantling networks far more sophisticated than hers. If she wanted a battle, I would give her one. But I'd do it by the book, my book. With precision. With finality. With zero mercy. The first lesson they drilled into us in SEAL training was simple. When you're under siege, don't just fortify, counterattack. War isn't about brute force. It's about intelligence, timing, leverage. The same rules applied here. Except my battlefield wasn't Fallujah or Kandahar. It was a neighborhood with trimmed hedges, HOA bylaws, and a monster in pearls waging psychological warfare from across the street. But now I knew her motive. Karen Nettle hadn't just set her sights on us because we were new, or because Rachel hadn't attended the HOA brunch. She wanted our daughter. Not out of love, but obsession. Compulsion. A gnawing need to possess what she'd been denied by the state twice. The moment I saw those denied adoption papers, I understood. Karen hadn't just targeted us randomly. She had chosen us. A new family. A vulnerable mother. A baby she thought she could take under the guise of concern. She underestimated who I was. And she didn't realize that the quiet husband in the plain t-shirt, holding his daughter gently in his arms, had once dismantled arms deals under satellite fire and ghosted entire insurgent cells in pitch-black jungle terrain. Now I just had to turn her playbook against her. Step 1. Isolation. Karen was powerful because she was connected. People feared her. The HOA board was a mix of cowardice and convenience, folks too tired or too passive to challenge her. So I started visiting neighbors. Not in anger. In transparency. With documents. Evidence. And calm. I showed them footage from our cameras. Karen removing flyers, watching our home from 4:43 to 5:02 every morning, peering into windows like she was scanning for targets. I showed them timestamps. Her trespassing. Her attempting to take Hannah. Her harassing Rachel with unwanted pamphlets, visits, letters. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. Truth speaks loud enough when you have receipts. Some neighbors closed the door. But more than I expected didn't. A man named Paul, HOA vice president, said softly, "We've all wanted to stop her. We just didn't know how." Now he did. Step 2, exposure. Rachel didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't blame her. She was exhausted, frayed at the edges, barely able to function. But when I told her what I planned, something shifted in her. She stood up, wiped her face and whispered, "She came for our child. Let's show her what a mother really is." So we went public. I posted a video online, just 5 minutes long. No rage. No dramatics. Just the facts. Footage of Karen trespassing. A clip of her holding Hannah on our porch. Audio from the HOA meeting where she pushed to label Rachel unstable. Snippets of the false CPS reports. Her adoption rejections. It went viral overnight. The caption read, "Our HOA president tried to take our baby. This is our story." Within hours, people were flooding our inbox with support. Former neighbors of Karen reached out anonymously. One sent us a digital copy of a restraining order, from another state. Karen had allegedly harassed a pregnant tenant in a condo she used to manage. Same pattern. Same obsession. But the case had been sealed. Until now. I sent it all to our lawyer. And then I made my final move. Step 3, pressure. I contacted every member of the HOA board and formally requested a vote for Karen's removal. I listed 16 violations, each backed by evidence. I cited bylaws she had broken, falsified, or weaponized. But more importantly, I included a quiet warning. If she isn't removed, this will become a class action lawsuit. That got their attention. The vote happened quietly. Rachel and I didn't attend. We stayed home. Watched Hannah sleep. Held hands. We found out the results via email the next morning. Karen Nettle removed from her post, effective immediately. Banned from holding any community office for life. Issued a cease and desist for all further contact with our family. But it wasn't over. 2 days later, a patrol car pulled into Karen's driveway. I watched from the porch. She came out screaming. Red-faced, disheveled, cursing about false stories and delusions. The officer didn't argue. He simply handed her a paper, a formal restraining order served on behalf of the state. 30 feet minimum distance. No contact. No proximity to Rachel or Hannah. One violation and she'd be arrested. Karen looked across the street, at me. I stood there, Hannah in one arm, the other resting gently on my belt. She didn't scream again. She just turned, stepped inside, and slammed the door behind her. That night, we slept with the windows open. For the first time in months, Rachel didn't cry. But the damage had been done. It took time to heal. Rachel started therapy. I quit flinching every time a car passed the house. The neighborhood slowly changed. Karen's house went up for sale, and within a month she was gone. No goodbye, no farewell letter, just vanished like a shadow that had overstayed its welcome. And the neighborhood? It changed too. The people who had watched in silence started speaking. The woman who once refused to make eye contact with us brought over soup. The man who always sped down the street now slowed his car, waved. A new HOA president was elected, one who knocked on our door with a smile and offered help, not rules. But most of all, we had peace. The kind you don't notice until you feel the absence of fear. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with Hannah in my lap. She giggled, grabbing at my dog tags. Rachel was watering the flowers. The sun dipped low. The sky glowed. And I thought about the irony. All those years I spent overseas, I thought I understood war. But nothing had tested me like this. Not the bullets. Not the missions. But protecting the people I loved. Without violence. Without revenge. Without breaking. That's the true test of strength. Because anyone can fight with fists. But it takes something more, something unshakable, to hold the line when the war looks like a whisper. And Karen? She never knew what kind of man she was dealing with. Not until it was far, far too late.